Sean, you wrote a book.
I did.
Now, this is your second major book.
Second major book. So I did the 100 things Nebraska fans should know and do before they die.
Excellent. It was. I commend you.
And that was 2013 when that came out.
Okay.
And I'll give you a little backstory on this book. So when Scott Frost was hired in 2018, Triumph Publishing, which is one of the largest sports publishing book companies in the country, they had done similar books to like Jim Harbaugh taking over Michigan and Urban Meyer coming back to Ohio State or going to Ohio State. And, you know, you write this like great book kind of telling you the story of turning the program around. And they envisioned that book for Nebraska because in 2018, we all envisioned that book. Mm-hmm. And so we had a title and everything set in place. Scott Frost and the Rebirth of Nebraska, or No Fear of Failure, Scott Frost and the Rebirth of Nebraska Football. Well, as you know, that book never got off the ground. I can remember in 2018, after the Michigan loss, I emailed the book company. We were talking. I go, yeah, probably not going to be able to write this book for 2019. And then, you know, here they got off to a great start in 2019 and they fell apart, went 5-7. I go, well, we're not going to be able to write this book next. So that book just kept getting kicked down the road.
I will tell you this. I didn't know any of that.
And I had elite notes and stuff that I was keeping for that book. And I was able to use a lot of it in my Scott Frost chapter. So the new book title that we're doing is called The Program, Nebraska, a curated history of the Cornhuskers. And it's a series that they're going to do. And they've done it in the NFL with the Packers. They call those the franchise.
Okay.
They've done it with Alabama. They've done it with the Yankees and the Red Sox. But I'm doing the Nebraska. I did the Nebraska version of the book. So I broke down the program in different sectors. The coaches. So I did different, long form chapters on coaches: Devaney, Osborne, Solich, Pelini, Frost. And just
you chose those.
I chose those. Yeah. Like I didn't really think it made sense to go like do Jumbo Steam. I don't think he would have.
Mike Riley.
Yeah. So I wrote I loved how the chapters turned out. I interviewed Frank Solich. I interviewed Tom Osborne for 3 hours.
Yeah. This is where I want to interject. I looked on while you were doing this, and this was was it 2 summers ago?
Yeah. Not this last summer, but the summer when Matt Rule first took over.
I was amazed. I don't mind telling the listeners, Sean did so many interviews, and you didn't necessarily have to. He could have gotten stuff written by others, stuff maybe you've written in the past. Instead, you did all of these fresh interviews with some of the biggest names in Nebraska football history. I was amazed you were able to do it. I mean, it took a lot of organization and just a lot of old-fashioned elbow grease. So the book, and I guess at this point I'm helping sell it, is a lot of fresh stuff that people won't know, or maybe stuff that they had an idea of but had long forgotten, and now when it reappears, they'll be like, oh yeah, and here's Jim Walden talking about this. Here's Mike Devaney talking about it. Bob's son. I know Tom Osborne. Here's Frank Solich talk. You got an interview with Frank. There's who else? Who else did you?
So I'll go. I interviewed Barney Cotton, and we hit on a lot of things with him because he coached with Bo. He played for Tom, and he coached for Frank. So Barney had some great insights. C.J. Zimmer. I have a Colorado chapter on that rivalry. I interviewed Dave Pilati, the historian of Colorado football. Frank Solich. Guy Ingles was maybe one of the more under the radar guys I talked to. The former Husker wide receiver from Omaha.
Knows a lot.
Played for Devaney, and he was a coach for Osborne, and so he had unreal insight. Jamie Cole, we have a chapter on Sam Foltz, and we relived that week in his relationship with the Foltzes and him making that phone call to the Foltz family and just everything that they went through. Jason Peter, Jerry Murtaugh, Jim Rose was excellent. Jim has been around a lot, growing up in Lincoln, play-by-play guy, historian.
Eloquent.
Jim Walden, who a lot of our younger listeners don't remember him, but he played for Devaney at Wyoming. He coached for Devaney at Nebraska. and he coached against Osborne at Iowa State.
Verbose. He's he likes
funny.
to talk.
He said that he gives Osborne a hard time because he gave him his one bad loss.
Yeah, well, Jim's really funny.
Because Iowa State was like one of the only like real bad losses Osborne. I mean, like where they were like a huge favorite and they lost.
Yeah, Jim Wald was Iowa State's head coach, Washington State's head coach, but he was an assistant for Devaney. That's why you talked to him. Right?
Jimmy Burrow, who played for Devaney, knows Osborne, coached for Frank. So unbelievable insight on a lot of different things. Joe Gans, with his insight on coaching for Bo, playing
better interviews that we've ever encountered. Joe Gans.
John Papuchis. I spoke with John Papuchis at length.
Wow.
Mark Moravec gave me a little bit on Mike Rozier. They were backfield mates.
Wow.
He's works for a Chief Construction. He's based out of Grand Island for Chief Construction now. Marvin Sanders, Mike Devaney at length for multiple interviews. Rick Kaczynski, Ron Brown, Sam Hahn. We talked about Fultz, and then over 3 hours of interviews with Tom Osborne, Tony Davis, and Zach Taylor.
Wow. That's remarkable. And it'll be in a book that comes out again. Say it, Sean, comes out
in July. And look, I had a lot of Frost interviews I had done, that never published, and things from that era. So, and some of that's in there too, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to put together.
And the reason we're talking about it now is because
we announced the release of it this week.
Okay.
And it will be everywhere. I mean, Triumph Publishing, the book will be at anywhere you can buy a book in the state. They'll have the book. And
well, I'm really proud of you. I'm serious. That's not it. I know what an undertaking that was for you, because it's not like you stopped your life to do it.
Still did my job at the same.
Yeah, and you still handled your family. I mean, I couldn't believe what you were doing. That was hard. I know it was hard.
And look, as an author,
like, it was pressure. I could hear it in your voice often.
I think people don't understand. Like, yeah, there's people like Joe Kesnowski or somebody big time when they do a book.
Poznansky. This was your one.
But like a big time name like that, when they get a huge, like, where they can just make that their full-time job, like
make it in advance.
And we'll sell over 10,000 copies of this book. It will be a successful book, but it's a different, like you can't like stop your life to do.
And I can remember literally the pressure I heard in your voice. That was a hard summer.
Worked a lot of I worked every weekend that summer.
It was a hard summer. I kind of lived it through you, and I was like, wow. I don't know how you did it. Really.
People have asked you, why have you never done a book?
Because that would be the third job. I have a radio job in the morning, and I have this job, and I can't take three.
And I know you well enough to know your style as a writer.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit your schedule.
No, I'm a little careful, pretty careful. So not you're not. Some people just work faster than others. You could also just say you work slow, Sipple. I don't know. I don't think I do. When I need to ramrod a column, I can ramrod it. I
mean, my strength in this book was just getting people on the phone. I mean, I had great success of tracking people down and getting them to talk. And
you did.
If you collect, 30 hours of interviews, you got a book.
You got a book, but it's not that simple, because you got to narrow it down. You have to pick the good stuff, which can be sort of taxing. You have to be discerning in what you put in the book. You just can't put everything in there. You want to put the very best stuff. You have to cull through a lot. I know you did.
I'm trying to remember. It's like 75, 80,000 words.
Yeah. The book is very handsome, and the foreword's by Tom, right?
Tom, yep.
Tom Osborne,
dedicated to teammates. He wrote the foreword.
It's good to have his name on that book along with yours.
No, and I thought about it like this. I mean, how many people now are going to get Tom Osborne for 3 hours?
You got him for 3 hours.
2 different sessions, yeah.
But some of that is just your willingness. I hate to keep praising you, and this will be the last bit of praise. Your willingness to sit down with him for 3 hours.
And for me, like, I've never been able to interview Tom one-on-one, let alone for that length, and then use the knowledge of what I've collected in 25 years to be able to ask him what I want.
Wow.
Like, we don't get that with Matt Rule.
Not yet.
I mean, where you can sit, I mean, like, you don't.
No, so you sat down with a legendary figure, and Tom is a very good interview. Is very well. He's very eloquent, and he's willing to share a lot, which is I've always been thankful to Tom.
He weighed in on Frost. I mean, he gave his. I hadn't seen like that quote from him, what he said about the Frost era and what happened, and
that's a good example.
One thing I was interested about Tom was, recap how you got to Nebraska, and just he was a graduate student, and he just showed up to Bob Devaney's office.
Yeah, and I think they made him
a dorm supervisor.
He did a good job,
and he impressed Devaney with his diligence, and all of a sudden he became a GA.
Yep. And it took off,
and then it just took off from there. But yeah,
you said something to me one time that, and I knew it, but again, this is the value of the book. That he called plays for 5 national title teams. He called all the plays. And you don't think of it because you forget about the Devaney years a little bit with Tom. He was the offensive play caller. Not many people can say they called plays for 5 national
from 69 to 97. And Guy Ingles brought this up. He goes, think about this, Sean. He called every play at Nebraska. Every play.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. To see, that's good. That's the kind of thing that would draw people into a book, and keep them reading.
And he gave like a real passionate quote, Guy Ingles too. He's like, just think about what Osborne did. Man, there ain't no players there. There ain't no players around Nebraska. And he figured out how to win when you didn't have like California, Texas. You don't have the players here.
He eventually got them.
No, I'm saying locally.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Where you can just build off like your neighboring play. Like you have, like he figured out a way to win with what he had, not just win, but dominate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Sean, we're not sitting here if it was not for Osborne. I try to tell the younger radio people and journalists that don't respect him. They don't respect him enough. And they'll say kind of snide things sometimes. I'm like, you understand that you don't have your job if it's not for Osborne. If Osborne didn't take this program to those heights, you can dispute this if you want. It's my contention that we wouldn't be sitting here if he didn't enhance this brand like he did. Like enhance it. I mean, he created it. I mean, Devaney started it, but I mean, if it doesn't continue under Osborne, then it's not going to be nearly the same.
Well, and just Devaney's willing to recognize like talent on his staff. Like Monty Kiffin was his defensive coordinator. Osborne was his offensive coordinator. And to understand and reckon, I mean, those guys were in their 20s and they were calling the plays for a veteran in Devaney.
Yeah, Devaney, there was a genius there, and there was a genius with Tom. And Tom's genius kind of grows as time goes on, as nobody's been able to replicate it at all. And what we saw with Tom was an incredible, like just this incredible leader. He held things together so well. If people think it was perfect under him, like the staff was perfect, if everything was going well all the time, no, it wasn't. It was, he held things together so well because he was such a charismatic and intelligent leader. And he's rare. He's just rare.
And he knew everyone's.
We didn't necessarily know how rare he was.
He knew everyone's name too on a team when you had like 200 players. And he would sit in the freshman locker room, the lowest of the low, at the desk in the lobby, just to learn and memorize every player's name.
That's real too. There's a kid named Tom Nelson that I went to high school with who was just a low-level walk-on, and he tells the story. Tom Nelson was a quarterback at Columbus during my era. He was a grade ahead of me, but walked on at Nebraska. And he tells the story of walking by Osborne and Osborne saying, "Hi, Tom." It's Tom Nelson. "Hi, Tom." And Tom was freaked out. Like, Tom Osborne knows my name.
No, my dad was a walk-on, never played a down, never dressed in a real game. 3 years here. We were in the 80s at a high school football game, and Osborne was there, and he's like, "Hi, Pat." And,
Jeez, that's remarkable.
And you can't even find his name, my dad's name, in anything.
That's Tom.
Like he knew, but think about when that happens, how hard you go for that guy.
100. I mean, he took it to a level that, again, I just say it's why we're sitting here.
And that's why no player badmouths him ever.
You don't hear it.
You don't ever.
You might hear a little bit in private. When you're a head coach and you're a leader of his magnitude, you're going to anger some people. So you hear it occasionally a little bit like off the record type stuff, but no, you don't hear much of it.